A pride of lions surrounded a lonely baby elephant. Just look who came to its rescue. The sun was merciless above Tsavo that day, stretching shadows like bones across the cracked, golden earth. Dry winds carried the scent of dust and heat, whispering through the thorny acacias like forgotten voices. Beneath that vast, relentless sky, a small figure moved uncertainly, its ears flapping erratically, its steps clumsy and halting. A baby elephant, barely more than a year old, wandered across the savannah with panic burning in its eyes. It cried out again, a short, wavering trumpet that vanished into the air like a question with no answer. Its mother was gone, lost during the chaotic migration when dust storms and predators drove the herd apart. One moment, she was there, her broad body like a shield, her scent a lullaby. The next, she was nowhere. And now, the calf was alone, too young to understand what it meant, too old to believe she would return. The grasses around him shivered not with wind, but movement, golden. Lean bodies crouched low in the dry cover. 12 lions, a pride, hungry and disciplined, eyes locked on the trembling shape in their midst. The baby took a step back, then another, but the circle tightened with each hesitant footfall. He tried to trumpet again, but the sound caught in his throat. The lead lioness stepped forward, muscles coiled, teeth bared, and then a sound. Not the thud of hooves, not the rumble of stampede, but something older, heavier, slower. Each step landed like thunder rolled beneath the crust of the earth. The grass parted, dust swirled, and from the haze emerged a silhouette so massive, so scarred. It looked as though it had risen from the bones of Tsavo itself, Muntu. He stood still for a heartbeat. His tusks were long, uneven, worn from years of battle and solitude. His ears bore notches from ancient fights. His left leg dragged slightly, favoring a wound that had never fully healed. Along. But his eyes were the color of storm clouds over scorched land, and they burned with memory. Rangers once spoke of him in low voices. Some said he had vanished decades ago. Others claimed he had become part of the forest, more spirit than beast. But here he stood, alive, solid, unyielding. And he was looking at the calf. The lions hesitated, unsure what to make of this ghost returned. Muntu did not lower his head. He didn't charge. He simply lifted his trunk, curled it inward, and let loose a single, resonant bellow. It wasn't loud. It was deep, aching, ancient. The sound of a father who had once screamed too late. The sound of a heart that never forgot. The lions backed away, not from fear, but from something older than fear. They scattered like mist. Muntu stepped forward and stood over the calf, who stared up at him with wide, unblinking eyes. He reached down slowly and wrapped his trunk around the small one's back. It wasn't a command, it was a vow. He would not let this one die, not this time. For a long moment, they stood together, an old warrior and a trembling orphan. But danger never vanishes so easily. Behind them, one lion, bold or foolish, had circled back. It leapt from the side, claws outstretched. Muntu turned sharply, shielding the calf. A claw raked down his hind leg, tearing through thick hide. Blood sprayed across the earth. The calf cried out in terror, huddling closer. But Muntu didn't move. He stood like stone, unwavering. The lion, finding no fear to feed on, fled. And then, as if summoned by fate, the sky darkened, clouds billowed across the horizon. The first drop of rain hit Muntu's back, then another, and then the heavens opened. Rain fell in sheets, cool and sharp. It washed the blood from Muntu's leg. It soaked the calf's skin. The earth drank it greedily, and together, the two elephants stood beneath it, cleansed not just of dust and blood, but of everything that had come before. The savanna around them blurred into silver, and for the first time in years, Muntu felt something shift inside, not peace, not yet, but direction, purpose. Over the next few days, the calf never left Muntu's side. He moved with clumsy mimicry, copying the way the old elephant dug for roots or snapped acacia branches. Muntu didn't speak in sound, but in action. When he walked toward a dry patch of earth and began to dig, the calf watched, then joined. When Muntu lifted his head and sniffed the wind, the calf did too. The lessons passed silently, an inheritance of survival, paid for in old pain. And through it all, Muntu watched the calf grow steadier, stronger, more confident, but also more curious. On the fourth day, they reached a watering hole. A herd stood at its edge, elephants of all sizes, clustered around the matriarch. The calf's ears perked. He let out a hopeful bleat and stepped forward. But the herd bristled, their trunks lifted, tasting the air. There was no scent of a mother on this calf. He was a stranger. The matriarch stepped forward and shook her head. The herd shifted, closing ranks. The calf froze, confused, hurt. Muntu moved before the calf could retreat. He placed himself between the herd and the little one, head high, shoulders broad, his eyes locked with the matriarch's. No threats, no challenge, just presence, just truth. If you cast him out, you cast me out too. The matriarch hesitated, then stepped forward, slowly, gently. She touched her trunk to Muntu's scarred cheek, a gesture older than language. She turned. The herd moved aside, forming a path. The calf was accepted, and Muntu, after decades of wandering, was finally home. That night, they rested beneath a crescent moon. The calf nestled beside Muntu, and the old elephant watched the stars. He didn't sleep. He never did anymore. But his heart felt lighter, and for once, the ache in his leg faded into the background. But Tsavo is a land that never sleeps. The next day, as the herd moved through a narrow ravine, a new danger crept near. 3 lines thin, desperate, waited in silence. The air grew still. Birds fell silent. Muntu sensed it before anyone else. He turned, eyes narrowing. The moment they struck, he was already moving. He charged, his great form thunderous, crashing against the rocky edge of the ravine. One lion backed away, another slipped. The third lunged and Muntu met it head on. The force of the collision sent Muntu staggering. His back leg buckled. He slid toward the cliff's edge. For a terrifying heartbeat, he hung there, massive form tilting, teetering toward the abyss, and then small feet, a small body. The calf pushed. He planted his feet, leaned in with all his might, and slowly, inch by inch, Muntu pulled himself back. The danger passed. The herd watched in reverent silence. A circle had completed. A lesson returned. The old had saved the young. And now, the young had saved the old. That evening, as the sun painted the sky in hues of gold and fire, Muntu stood on a quiet ridge, alone. He looked east, not toward where he was born, but where he had once lost everything. Behind him, the calf woke, saw him, and without hesitation, followed. No words, no trumpet, just footsteps. Together, they walked not away from the herd, but towards something greater, toward purpose, toward legacy. In the stories told around ranger fires, they say that in Tsavo, on stormy nights, you can still hear them, 2 sets of steps, one heavy, one light, walking together across the plains, not lost, not forgotten, but chosen. The sun rose over Tsavo like it always did, burning and relentless, casting long gold fingers across the dry earth and turning every shadow into a secret. But this morning felt different. Beneath the acacia trees and along the baked ridge where silence usually reigned, 2 figures moved in rhythm, one massive, with each step carved from memory, and one small, still unsure but growing bolder with every breath. Muntu and the calf had left the herd not out of rejection, but out of something deeper, an invisible calling that seemed to hum beneath their feet as they walked. The older bull didn't speak, not with sound, but with glances, pauses, a shift in posture that guided without command. The calf had begun to mirror him, mimicking the way he tested the wind before stepping into clearings, how he sniffed the soil before stopping to drink, how he listened, really listened, not just for sound, but for silence that felt wrong. They traveled eastward, where the land began to rise into low hills. The grass here was thinner, patchier, and carried a scent not of life, but of old fires. As they climbed one slope, Muntu paused. The calf stopped too, waiting for a sign. The bull turned his head slightly and stared down into a shallow valley below. where blackened tree trunks jutted like broken teeth from scorched ground, the remnants of an old burn, long cooled but not forgotten. Muntu's breath caught in his throat, the way it always did when the land remembered before he did. It was here so many years ago. He stepped forward slowly, each footfall stirring the ash into soft ghosts. The calf followed close, curious but hesitant, as if he too could sense that this place carried weight. Muntu came to a halt beside a twisted stump, charred and half swallowed by the earth. He touched it with his trunk, and for a moment, he was no longer in the present. He was back in the blaze, the air thick with smoke, his herd screaming, flames devouring grass and thorn alike, and in the chaos, his son's cry, a short, sharp trumpet of fear. He had run toward it, but too late, always too late. He hadn't found a body. Just the crushed imprint of small feet, surrounded by lion prints. They'd taken him after the fire, when everyone else was scattered, disoriented. Muntu never forgave himself for surviving. He had wandered into exile not because they banished him, but because he couldn't bear the weight of his own name. But now, standing here with a calf who looked up at him not with blame, but trust, Muntu felt something shift. A question that had once ended in silence now had a second chance. He lowered his massive head and touched his forehead to the charred earth. A silent promise. This one would not be taken. Not again. The calf moved closer, brushing his side gently, and Muntu responded with a low, humming rattle in his throat, a sound of peace, of presence. Then, from beyond the valley came a strange noise, not the wind, not animals, a metallic clatter, rhythmic and foreign. Muntu lifted his trunk, scenting the air. The smell was sharp, artificial, something not born of earth or fire. The calf pressed close to him, ears flicking, and then came the buzz, a high-pitched whine above them. Muntu turned his gaze skywards and spotted it, a drone, small, black, darting like a wasp in the morning light. It hovered for a moment, watching them, then zipped away toward the east. Muntu growled low in his chest. He knew what it meant. Humans, and not the good kind. He had learned long ago that not all who walked on two legs carried compassion. Some came with wires and weapons, chasing not balance but control. Poachers, traffickers, the men who didn't just kill, but erased. They would see a calf with no herd and an old bull far from his prime and think easy. Muntu began walking faster, nudging the calf along. The sense of unease rose like heat off stone. By midday, they reached a watering hole smaller than most, but shaded. Muntu let the calf drink while he stood watch, ears wide, eyes scanning the brush. But the water tasted wrong, bitter, metallic. Muntu stomped the ground once. A signal. The calf looked up, confused. He wanted to drink more, but Muntu pulled him away. Behind them, hidden beneath thick leaves, was a device, a small black box nestled in the roots of a tree. A tracking beacon. Muntu didn't know what it was called, but he'd seen its kind before. Years ago when a ranger had shown him mercy and removed one from a wounded zebra. It pulsed faintly with red light. He crushed it underfoot without hesitation. The sound it made was not loud, but the echo in his chest was. They were being hunted. That night, they didn't sleep. Muntu led the calf through dry riverbeds, beneath thorn cover, along paths that only old ghosts knew. He moved with the silence of a shadow, placing his feet in old tracks, avoiding even the crackle of dry twigs. The calf was tired, stumbling sometimes, but he never complained. He was learning that survival wasn't just about strength, but memory. Near dawn, they paused at the edge of a ravine. Below, a strange glow flickered in the trees. Lanterns. Fires Muntu couldn't tell, but he saw the shape of men two, maybe three, moving slowly, scanning the ground. One held something long and black, glinting in the firelight. A rifle. The other held a leash. Muntu's eyes narrowed. At the end of the leash was a dog, its nose low, trained for scent. They weren't just passing through, they were looking, and they were close. Muntu led the calf west, moving fast now, adrenaline dulling the pain in his leg. They didn't stop until the sky bled with orange again. On a ridge far from the valley, they collapsed beneath an old fig tree. The calf dropped first, exhausted, curling into the crook of Muntu's side. The old bull stayed awake. Always. His ears twitched at every sound, his eyes tracking the moon's rise. For the first time, Muntu wondered if he had made a mistake leaving the herd. But no. He looked down at the calf, now breathing steadily, and knew they would have found him no matter what. He had done the only thing he could. He had chosen the harder path, the lonelier one, but also the right one. Before sleep finally came to him in fragments, Muntu thought he heard something. Not nearby, not in the wind, but within. A voice, not in words, just a feeling, like a heartbeat that wasn't his. A memory, or a whisper. The same feeling that had made him rise from the forest days ago. He didn't understand it, but he trusted it. As his eyes finally closed, the calf stirred and placed his small trunk over Muntu's tusk, gentle, familiar. And Muntu, drifting somewhere between dream and duty, felt the weight of the past ease just slightly. For once, he did not carry it alone. The next morning broke with silence so complete it pressed down like weight. No birds, no insects, even the wind, usually restless through Tsavo's thorns, had paused. Muntu woke with a slow exhale, his ribs expanding like ancient bellows. The calf still slept, curled into the crook of his side, his breathing soft and steady. For a moment, the old bull allowed himself to believe they were safe, that the distance they'd covered had placed enough wilderness between them and whatever moved behind those glowing lights last night. But instinct whispered otherwise. There was a wrongness in the stillness. Muntu rose quietly, careful not to wake the calf, and stepped to the edge of the hill they had slept beneath. What he saw was nothing, and that, more than anything, chilled him. The brush was unbroken, the trail below was empty, but something tugged at him. Shadows that didn't move, leaves that didn't rustle. He listened harder, not with ears, but with the silence behind the noise. And he realized the birds hadn't returned. Not a single cry, not a single wing beat. Something was out there, watching, waiting. He turned back and nuzzled the calf awake. The young one stirred slowly, blinking up with wide, trusting eyes. But the moment Muntu pressed his trunk low and gave a small grunt, a command to rise quickly, the calf obeyed without hesitation. They descended the slope without feeding. No time. Muntu led them along a narrow game trail he hadn't walked in years. One carved between brittle boulders and flanked by thickets sharp enough to draw blood. He remembered this path from long ago. It wound toward the old dried marshlands, a place no one hunted anymore. The grass there grew crooked. The ground shifted underfoot. Even predators avoided it, which was why Muntu headed there now. Because the places the wild forgets are sometimes the only places left for those being hunted. The sun climbed, and with it came heat. The calf began to stumble again. Legs dragging, Muntu slowed only enough to let him catch breath before pushing forward. He could not risk pausing, not when something unnatural followed in the hush. Then, as they rounded a rocky bend, Muntu froze. Across the path lay a carcass. Antelope, still fresh. The eyes were open. Flies hadn't yet come. But what made Muntu's skin twitch wasn't the death, it was the way it died. Its legs were bound. Rope, man-made, had cut into the flesh. The neck was snapped clean, and beside it, a print. Not lion, not hyena, boot. Fresh, deep. Men were closer than he thought. Muntu grunted sharply and shoved the calf back into the brush. They moved off trail, hacking through thorns and dry vines, following no visible route but something deeper. Old intuition, memory carved into his bones. They reached the marshlands by midday. It was as he remembered, strange. The ground looked solid but squelched underfoot. Trees grew in gnarled spirals, their bark ashy and split. And above it all, a soft mist clung low, as if the place refused to fully wake. The calf looked uneasy, stepping carefully, ears twitching. Muntu gave a soft reassurance. He knew the feeling. This place didn't welcome even the wild, but it hid, and that was enough. They crossed into a hollow near the center of the marsh where fallen trees created a rough ring. Muntu began gathering loose branches and old grass with his trunk, spreading them gently into a nest of sorts for the calf. The young one laid down slowly, curling into himself. He was hungry, thirsty, but there was nothing here. Muntu stood watch. Hours passed, light shifted, still no movement from beyond the edge. But he knew better than to believe in peace. As twilight approached, the sky burned gold at the edges and cooled to violet above. That's when he saw it. Just beyond the trees, a flicker. Not fireglass, reflecting light, a lens, binoculars. Then a second flash, a signal. Muntu inhaled sharply. The calf noticed. He stood, wobbling, eyes wide. Muntu stepped forward, placing himself between the boy and the trees. A low growl rumbled in his chest. And then, behind the mist, the first figure emerged. A man, crouched, dressed in dull green, holding no weapon, just staring. Another appeared beside him. This one held a camera. Muntu didn't move. The calf pressed against his leg, trembling. Then came the third, not crouching, standing. Rifle slung over one shoulder. The man stepped into full view, hands raised but not empty. In one, he held a small device. It beeped once. Muntu flinched. The calf cried out. The man pointed the device at the old bull and pressed something. A low, pulsing tone filled the air. Muntu staggered backward. Pain lanced through his side. The scarred spot on his shoulder had burned. Years ago, during a drought, he had wandered near a reserve. Rangers had tagged him metal deep under skin, long forgotten, until now. The pulse called to it. Heard him, the calf panicked and ran, hooves splashing through the shallow marsh. The men moved instantly, split into formation. One chased with a net, another raised the tranquilizer gun. Muntu roared. It wasn't the same as before. This wasn't grief, it was rage. A fury awakened. He charged without warning, thundering through reeds, eyes locked on the man with the gun. The first shot missed, the second hit, but it was small. Meant for a calf. Muntu barely felt it. He struck the ground inches from the man's feet, spraying muck and earth. The man dropped the rifle and fled. The others scattered. Muntu turned, following the scent trail of the calf. He found him stuck half buried in soft mud, legs flailing. The net was nearby but not on him yet. Muntu reached him, wrapped his trunk around the calf's belly, and yanked. With a wet gasp, the calf popped free. Together, they ran, back through the marsh, through trees that moaned in the dusk, through reeds that tried to hold them like fingers of the dead. They didn't stop until the stars rose high. When they finally collapsed, it was in a patch of stone under a crooked baobab, their bodies heaving, legs shaking. The calf curled tightly against Muntu, his small body soaked and shivering. The old bull lowered his head until their foreheads touched. And this time, the hum in his chest wasn't warning, it was sorrow. He had led them into danger thinking isolation was safety. But these men, they had maps, devices. They knew more than just trails. They knew names. And now, they knew his. He closed his eyes. Somewhere, something still pulled at him an echo, a thread. Not just danger, not just survival, something more. A whisper that wasn't the wind. The same presence he'd felt that night, long ago, before his son vanished. Was it madness or memory, or something older than both as sleep claimed them? Muntu dreamed of a place with no men, no guns, no fear, just sky, grass, and the soft, quiet weight of a child leaning into him, not lost, not hunted, just safe. The wind returned the next morning, not gently, but like a breath held too long and finally exhaled. It rattled through the thorns and dry grasses of Tsavo, lifting dust into ribbons and carrying the scent of old rain. Blood, and something more ancient bone. Muntu awoke first. He always did. His leg ached more than usual. The tranquilizer from the night before having left a dull throb in the muscle. But pain was no stranger to him. It was the language of survival. The calf beside him stirred, blinking sleep from his eyes, his small trunk brushing against Muntu's leg like a question. The old bull stood slowly, limbs stiff but sure, and looked east, toward the horizon's edge. That feeling, faint but persistent, was there again. A direction not marked on any map. a place that didn't call with sound or scent, but something deeper. And he knew now they couldn't keep running. Not in circles, not forever. They had to go toward it, whatever it was. So they walked, past the rocks scorched black by old fires, past the scrublands where even the vultures refused to land. Muntu led with quiet confidence, but he knew the odds were changing. The humans would regroup. They had technology, patience, traps, and soon they'd have reinforcements. Drones, collars, dogs. The land was no longer sacred. It was gridded, measured, watched. But still, there were places no camera dared look, places old as the dust itself. They reached such a place by midday. It was marked not by trees or water, but by absence, a vast depression in the earth where nothing grew. Flat, silent, the edges littered with sun-bleached bones elephants, zebras, buffalo, not scattered but arranged, as if the wind itself had paused to lay them gently. Muntu stopped at the rim. The calf hesitated, but followed. The air here was heavy, humming with something just beneath hearing. Muntu stepped forward, slow and deliberate. The bones didn't crack beneath his feet, they yielded, as if they remembered him. And perhaps they did. For this was a place where the great herds once died during the droughts of long ago. A burial field not made by death alone, but by decision where the old came to lie down when they felt their end near. Muntu's own father had come here, though he hadn't seen it himself. Just stories. The kind told in trumpeted bursts between generations. But now, walking among the skeletons, he understood. This wasn't a graveyard, it was a memory, a place where the land still listened. They moved slowly through the field. The calf didn't speak, but his steps grew gentler. His ears flattened in reverence. Even he, young as he was, could feel the weight in the dust near the center. Muntu stopped before a particularly massive skull, cracked but intact. He placed his trunk atop it, a greeting, a recognition, and then the sound came not from above or behind, but from inside the earth. A groan, a hollow shift. The calf startled, but Muntu stood firm. The skull before him had moved, tilted slightly, revealing beneath it the rim of a tunnel. Not man-made, not dug, natural, formed by generations of rains carving paths between limestone and silence. Muntu stared down into it. Darkness, cool air, and that pull stronger than ever now. He looked at the calf. The young one blinked slowly, then stepped forward. No fear, just trust. Together. They descended. The tunnel was wide enough for Muntu to move, though he had to stoop. The walls were damp, lined with minerals that glimmered faintly. Strange shapes jutted from the stone fossils. Maybe, or roots, or remnants of something forgotten. The further they went, the cooler it became, and quieter, until even their footfalls seemed swallowed. Then came the carvings, not words, not pictures, just patterns, circular grooves etched into the walls, some no larger than hoofprints, others wide as a man's chest. Muntu paused, brushing them with his trunk. He didn't know who had made them, not elephants, not men, but they pulsed with meaning. And then, the chamber. It opened suddenly like a breath held for centuries, a wide, domed space beneath the earth, lit only by a thin shaft of light filtering through a crack above. In the center, a pool, still, black, ancient. Muntu approached it slowly, his reflection shimmering. Behind him, the calf hesitated, sensing something sacred. The old bull looked down, but the image that stared back wasn't quite his own. The eyes were younger, the tusks sharper, but it was him long ago, and beside him in the reflection, a smaller elephant, his son. Muntu pulled back, startled. The water rippled, the vision vanished, but something in him stirred, a memory not his, or a warning. He turned to the calf, who stepped forward and looked into the water too. For a moment, Muntu saw something in the young one's eyes, a flicker, a recognition, not of place, but of connection. Could the land remember? Could it call back what had been lost? Or was this simply the mind bending under fear and fatigue before he could ponder further? The silence shattered. A crack, a rustle, voices, human, faint, far, but approaching. Muntu moved quickly, nudging the calf behind a fallen slab. He didn't hide. He stood in full view of the entrance, waiting. The first man who appeared wore khaki, binoculars. The second held a tablet, scanning, searching. The third rifle. Always the third. Always the gun. They paused at the chamber's mouth. Surprised to see the bull already staring at them, one man raised his hands. "Easy," he said softly, as if kindness could erase the chase. Muntu didn't move. The man with the tablet tapped the screen. "It's him," he muttered. "The old ghost." "Tagger kill the third man?" asked. The one in the lead hesitated. "Depends if he runs." Muntu didn't. He stepped forward once. Just once, a warning. The rifle rose. But before it could aim, the ground beneath the man gave slightly a sinkhole, sudden and sharp. He stumbled. The shot fired wild, the sound deafening. The chamber echoed like thunder. The calf screamed. Muntu charged, not at the men but at the wall. He struck at full force, shaking dust and stones loose. The tremor triggered a collapse. Rocks fell, light vanished. The tunnel behind them was sealed. The men were gone, either fled or trapped. Silence returned. The pool rippled. Muntu turned back to the calf, breathing hard. The young one ran to him, pressing close, shivering. Muntu lowered his head and let their foreheads meet again. The chamber was dark now, but not lifeless. In the silence, Muntu heard it again. That heartbeat, that echo, stronger than ever. And this time, it wasn't memory, it was promise. That night, beneath the bones of centuries, the old bull and the calf lay beside each other. They didn't sleep, not fully, but they rested, wrapped not in safety, but something older, something sacred. And outside, above, far beyond the sealed chamber, the stars blinked quietly, unaware that beneath their light, something forgotten had awakened. Above the earth, the winds had changed again. They blew from the west, carrying the scent of char and sun-scorched thorns. But deep beneath that same earth, under layers of stone and bone and time, Muntu stirred. The great bull awoke not from sleep but from stillness, from a moment so quiet and long it felt as if even time itself had taken a breath. The calf beside him was still curled up, his eyes fluttering, legs twitching slightly in dreams. Muntu blinked slowly, adjusting to the thin darkness of the chamber. They had been here 2 days now, maybe more. The sun didn't reach this far below. Only the pool, faintly glowing now, gave shape to the stone walls around them. Muntu stood slowly. His joints cracked in protest, but there was strength still in his body. Not the explosive kind he had once used to fend off lions or charge poachers, but the slow-burning kind born of memory and choice. He stepped toward the pool again. It was still. The surface no longer shimmered with visions. It reflected only what was real: his scarred frame, his chipped tusks, the long crease across his right flank that a bullet had once left. But beside him in the water, always, was the calf, smaller, thinner, with the beginnings of tusks now pushing forward. And something in the way the young one stood, not just close, but aligned, made Muntu feel the ache in his heart stretch into something else. Legacy. Not the kind carved in stone or remembered by men, but the kind that walks beside you in silence and watches every step. The kind that chooses to follow without being asked. Outside the sealed tunnel, faint rumblings had begun. He felt it before he heard it, the soft grind of machines. Somewhere, far above, the humans were returning, digging, searching, reaching with wires and data in hands that grasped but never understood. Muntu touched the calf gently with his trunk. The young one stirred and rose. Their eyes met. No fear, just readiness. And together, they began to move. Muntu didn't lead this time. He walked beside. The tunnel ahead was dark, unexplored, but old instincts told him it would rise eventually. Every place below the ground had an exit. It was how the earth breathed. As they walked, the air began to shift. The floor rose, subtle at first. The walls widened, and then came the scent, faint, sweet. The smell of damp leaves and sunlight filtered through bark. Hope, behind them. The tunnel collapsed again. A slow echo swallowed in stone. They never looked back. After what felt like half a day, the light changed. It wasn't just a crack, it was movement. The way leaves fluttered against brightness. Muntu stepped through first, then the calf. They emerged into a grove unlike any the bull had seen. Giant fig trees arched overhead like cathedral columns. The floor was moss and soft roots. Water trickled somewhere unseen. And birds, the first they'd heard in days, sang not in alarm, but in song. And in the very center of the grove, nestled among ferns and vines, was a third figure, an elephant, old, older than Muntu. Her skin sagged like folded paper, her eyes nearly closed, but her ears twitched at their arrival. She did not speak. She simply nodded once. Muntu stepped forward. Slowly, they had known each other once. In youth, before the exile, before the burning. She had led the inner herds during the droughts. She had chosen to stay when others fled. And now she was still here, in the one place the wild had reclaimed. She turned her head slightly, revealing behind her a small cluster of calves young, untagged, unknown to any map, hidden, like seeds waiting for rain. Muntu bowed his head low, and beside him, the calf did the same. The matriarch touched her trunk to his, not as greeting, but benediction. That night, the grove sang, crickets, frogs, the low hum of wind through tree hollows. Muntu lay beneath an arching fig, his side warm against the calf's. The pain in his leg returned, but he did not mind. It was part of the story now. The scar had meaning. That same night, in the world above, the poachers reached the burial field. They found the collapsed tunnel. Equipment was brought, lights, teams, but the chamber was gone, as if the earth had closed its ribs again, refusing to betray what it had cradled. Reports were filed. The tag on Muntu's shoulder stopped transmitting. Some believed he had died. Others, quietly, believed he had chosen to vanish. A legend, a ghost. Days turned into weeks. The grove remained hidden, but within it, Muntu began to teach again. Not just one calf now, but several. He showed them how to listen for ground that lies, how to drink without stirring the surface, how to watch the birds for danger. And always, he walked beside the first calf, the one who had followed without knowing why, the one who now led the others into the clearing first. His steps cautious, but confident. One evening, as the last red light folded beneath the trees, the matriarch approached Muntu one final time. She looked tired deeper than body. She had not spoken in days. But now, she touched his side once and turned toward the far edge of the grove. Then, without sound, she walked away, alone. Muntu watched until she disappeared. The next morning, the calves gathered near her tree. She was gone. Not in death, in choice, like those before her. Muntu didn't cry. He simply stood long, head bowed, then turned to the calf and said, "Without words, it's yours now that day." The young one led the others out of the grove, not far, just to the edge, to teach, to explore. And Muntu remained behind, not in retreat, in guardianship. The path beneath the grove needed watching. Someone had to keep the world above from reaching too deep. Someone had to remember. Months passed, then years. Rangers occasionally reported hearing trumpet calls from deep within Tsavo's protected zones, calls they couldn't trace. At night, camera traps sometimes caught shapes too large for the expected herds. One image showed a young bull leading calves across a river flanked by a massive figure half shrouded in dust and light. Experts called it artifact, glitch, but some knew better. They said he still walked, still taught, still watched. And in the dry seasons, when the sky cracked and the grass thinned and lions prowled the riverbeds, the herds that vanished didn't die. They simply moved into the unseen corners of the world, where stories became refuge and memory became path. In Tsavo, they say that if you walk long enough, quiet enough, with your heart listening more than your ears, you might feel it. A tremor in the earth. Not danger, not storm, just footsteps, one old, one new, walking together, always.